Hey, Frank Couples Counselor here. I remember some years ago when I was on stage, I was giving some announcements, and I was up on stage for about a good 5 minutes ish. And towards the end of my talk, giving the announcements, I had everybody sit down, and in the midst of their sitting down, a friend of mine came up to me and said, "Frank, XYZ." I'm like, "XYZ?" And then I turned to a friend. I turned to my friend. I says, "XYZ, what's XYZ?" He says, "Examine your zipper." And I looked down, and my zipper was way down. And I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh!" Right? And the whole time, that 5 minutes giving this talk in front of hundreds of people, my zipper was down. I think about that. I look, that's kind of like in many of our relationships with our spouse in our marriage. A lot of times, if we are not cautious and we don't take the time to recognize, we can miss out on a lot of learned lessons and opportunities to change behaviors that are not conducive or not good for our relationship in our marriage with our wife. And when we are not careful, what could happen is that, and this happens a lot when I work with couples, what happens is at the end of the day, when the couple comes in, or I talk with the couple and I ask questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 meaning awesome marriage, 1 meaning terrible, it sucks, where do you rate yourself? One partner would say, "Oh, guarantee, we are a 9. We are a 9. We're just here for a touch up." And after some self-reflection, the other partner would pause and say, "To be honest with you, Frank, I think it's a 4." And or sometimes it'd be like the one partner would say, "You know what, we're not perfect, but I'd say we're about a 7." And the other partner would say, I would say we're at a 3." And one partner would be like, "What? A 3? Oh my gosh, do you think we're that bad?" And then as we meet and we open up and unpack what's going on, realizing that there's traits inside of the partner that's like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know. I didn't know you felt that way. I didn't know." And the conversation, the sessions would unpack all the things. Why? Because one partner was not aware of the traits that he or she was portraying, and wasn't able to articulate or address it or take the time to slow down and pay attention. And so today I want to talk about the traits of someone who shows toxic communication, right? The things that we need to recognize in ourselves, because a lot of times it's easy for us to recognize in others, right? It's easy for us to recognize what's going on in someone else. Like, you have this problem and you have that problem. We live in a society, still going through puberty. I'm just kidding. We live in a society where it's so easy to criticize someone else and criticize what they do, and the food in their teeth, and the blemishes on their face, and their character, etc. But a lot of times what we need to do is look in the mirror, because a lot of times the state of our marriage is just because of the state of our heart. That was good. The state of our marriage is because it reflects and manifests in the state of our hearts. Today, I want to share with you the 3 things that we need to recognize in ourselves that is causing toxic communication, that may look like, hey, am I the reason for the toxicity or the spiraling of our marriage between me and my wife? Here are 3 things I want to share with you that we need to recognize in ourselves, because you better recognize. If you don't, you're going to find yourself at a very distant relationship with you and your wife. So the first thing that we need to recognize is self-reflection of your patterns, right? Of your patterns, right? Self-reflection of your patterns. And this is important because we need to reflect our patterns. The patterns, what I mean patterns, is paying attention to how you and your wife interact. So the patterns would be something like pay attention to those triggers. What are the things that she does? What are the things that she says? What are the things that you see? Maybe it's a it's an inflection of her voice, it's the volume, it's the way, the things that she says, it's that look on her face, right? So pay attention to the things that she does that triggers you. And then when she does that, what do? Do you defend back? Do you justify, or does your volume go up? Do you attack back with excuses, and then when you do that, what does she do? She comes back at you, and then when she comes back at you with her responses, what do? Do you shut down? Do you go quiet? Do you go silent? Right? What happens? What if I was to put a camera in your home watching this, like an investigator looking at the factual details, right? Remember, a lot of investigators, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts, right? We're not looking for what you were thinking. What were the facts that were happening in the moment? Who goes what? And when you shut down, what does she do? Does she keep on coming at you with questions, right? And the volume gets louder, and then what do? Do you walk away and you go to your room and you go just shut the door and you just watch TV? Or does she leave the house, or do you leave the house and go for a walk, come back, and then she comes back at you with more questions, and then here we go, this cycle and pattern, right? The word is patterns. And the thing is, how you do this one conflict is how you do a lot of your other conflicts, right? And so paying attention to the patterns. Maybe they don't all look exactly the same, but there are some habitual things, some cyclical pattern-like things that happen in your conflict. And so this is where you need to just slow down and take a self-reflection of your patterns. What do you do? Not just her, but the patterns between you. What do? Do you have a tendency of shutting down? Do you have a tendency of going quiet? Do you have a tendency of yelling? Do you have a tendency of walking away? Do you have a tendency of cussing her out and being condescending in your room? What are your patterns? Pay attention and take notice of your patterns of behavior and words and speech. Notice your patterns. The other thing is, after we self-reflect of your patterns, right? The behavior, the actual factual, observable patterns between the two of you. Next thing is pay attention to your emotional reactions. Pay attention to your emotional reactions. In other words, when these patterns of behaviors are happening, what are emotional reactions? Now, I do know that a lot of times it's going to be like frustration. It's going to come out like irritation or anger or mad. And a lot of times those angers and reactions of anger and frustration are justifiable. Right? Maybe there were times where you found out. There was a time when you found out that your wife was cheating on you, right? Of course, that's that mad anger, frustrated, irritation, shocked, right? All those kind of emotions. Outside of that, there are other things that causes those frustrations and anger and irritations. And what we know is that frustration, irritation, anger, those are protective emotions. But if you think again like of a iceberg, you see the tip of the iceberg, but underneath the waterline is this huge range of emotions. So on the tip is typically the frustrations, it's typically the anger, it's typically that irritation, that frowning on the face, that loud voice and the pointed words. That's the frustration that we tend to show our wife. But beneath the waterline, what's that? It's the softer emotions that we have a difficulty communicating, articulating, slowing down, and paying attention to. And so now when things have de-escalated and the anger and frustration and that bout between you and your wife has calmed down, and you are at this calmer state of heart and mind, and you reflect and you pay attention, what was your emotional reactions? That even though it came out of frustration, maybe underneath the emotional waterline of your heart, what was really going on is you're scared, or maybe you're sad, or maybe you was just lonely, or maybe you were just feeling hopeless. There's a range of emotions. There's a whole lot of emotions, softer emotions that we tend not to slow down and really tune into, because what we know is that emotion is the language of love. Emotions are the language of love. And so if we just slow down here and pay attention to these emotions, what was underneath that anger? What was underneath that frustration? What was underneath that irritation? Maybe underneath all of that was really feeling hopeless for your marriage, feeling confused because you didn't know what to do and how to say something between you and your wife without having to trigger this negative pattern of cycle of argument and conflict between you and her. And so you just went quiet, or you shot back a hurtful remark because you just didn't know what to say in those moments, right? And so we have to slow down, pay attention to those emotional reactions, because I believe that every person has a positive intention, but it comes out hurtful because they don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how else. They get caught up in this negative pattern. They just caught up in this negative pattern, and in that negative pattern is always going to be nasty, ugly, just hurtful things that's going to be said and done between the two of you, right? But if we put that pattern aside and look outside of the pattern into our positive intention, that heartfelt love that we're trying to send this message towards our wife, but we just don't know how. We just don't know what to say. We don't know how to slow down. But I'm telling you here today that you need to pay attention, slow down. And now that things have de-escalated, your heart rate has calmed down, the tension in your body has calmed down. What were those true emotional reactions that you were feeling inside when these things between you and her was happening at that moment? Tune in and hear, what was I feeling? And the other thing is seek feedback from trusted others, right? Seek feedback from trusted others. It's having to have this conversation between you and your partner, your wife, between you and a good friend, you and a mentor, or even you and a therapist, and just kind of getting some feedback. Maybe they've noticed patterns. They've noticed these patterns that you have a hard time and difficulty expressing, right? They've noticed these patterns, says, yeah, I kind of see that in you, Frank. When you do this and when you say that, you see and say these things, your perspective and what you make meaning of that event is that, but really what I really think is going on is X, Y, and Z. I think you really love her, but you don't know how to say it, and it just comes out wrong, right? Or it just comes out in a way that you just don't feel safe in communicating. And so having to seek feedback from trusted others is huge. It's almost as if you're asking someone else to put a mirror to your face and standing next to you in that mirror and say, this is what I see, right? And the reason why I use the word trusted is because you trust those words. I'm not telling you go find an acquaintance. I'm not saying go find somebody off the streets and say, bruh, can you tell me, right? And no, it's having to go to those trusted loved ones who you know, like, and trust, and that's going to tell you the God honest truth of what's going on. I says, hey, can you just tell me, let me know, what do you see? When you notice these behaviors between me and my wife, what do you notice? Or even between me and my friends or other people, what patterns do you notice inside of me that just doesn't look right? I need some feedback, right? They say feedback is the breakfast of champions, right? If we want to champion our marriage, we need to get feedback from trusted others. And until then, right, this is probably your pastor. This is probably your friends, your best friends, your accountability friends. This is probably going to a therapist. But having to seek feedback from trusted others to help you identify, to see those patterns, and then help you kind of come to this place of you having to sit down. Even journaling. Journaling is such a huge thing. There's a lot of research behind putting pen or pencil to paper and writing out those emotions, writing out those behaviors. Eventually in that journal entry, you're going to come out with some and identify what were the things underneath the iceberg of emotion that you're really feeling in those moments. And I would encourage you, men, to recognize what are the things, the toxic communication behaviors and patterns that you have within yourself that's causing you to have distance between you and your wife, that's causing this emotional instability in your marriage. right? And so this is so crucial for our relationships, because if we can impact the marriage, we can impact the family. And if we can impact the family, we can impact the community around us. If you've been enjoying what I've been sharing, I would encourage you, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, put some comments on there, share this with other friends and family. I just want to add value and help others around us to simply do this. Let's enjoy life together. Take care.